In this video we're going to talk about the different types of guitar strings for electric and acoustic guitars and help you find the strings that will work best for you no matter what kind of guitar or style of guitar you play. This video was made in collaboration with our friends at D'Addario, and I'm delighted to have partnered with them for this video because I've been using their guitar strings for about 27 years. Okay, when we talk about guitar strings, the majority of the time we're talking about the thickness of the strings. That's how we differentiate between them. We call the thickness of the string gauge. Now the gauge of a guitar string refers to its diameter measured to the thousandth of an inch. Essentially, the higher the numbers, the thicker the strings. Now rather than say the thickness of all 6 strings in a set, we typically refer to a string pack by the thickness or gauge of its high E string. That's the thinnest string. So if you hear someone refer to a set of 10s, they're talking about a set of strings where the thinnest string is 10 thousandths of an inch thick. Now this matters a lot for guitarists because the gauge of the strings can dramatically affect how the guitar will play and feel. Heavier strings have more resistance to them, which requires, more hand and finger strength. Heavier gauge strings are harder to press down. Lighter strings have less resistance and are easier to press down. But it's not just resistance that we're talking about here. As we move up in string gauge, the tone of the strings will begin to change as well. Generally speaking, lighter strings will be snappier and more flexible, while heavier strings will offer more volume and sustain. So what should we be looking out for when we're choosing the right guitar string gauges for us? Let's find out. Here are a few starting points to consider when you're selecting your ideal string gauge. Number 1, the length of the neck of the guitar, which is the scale length of your guitar. The style and genres of music you play most often on that guitar, the level of string tension that feels the most comfortable in your hands, the intensity of your picking, do you strum chords like Bob Dylan? Are you down picking like crazy like James Hetfield in Metallica? All of these factors contribute to finding the perfect set of strings for your favourite guitar. Alright, let's get into it and walk through each of the common guitar string gauges. For 8s, we typically find this gauge only available for electric guitars. This is because electric guitars tend to use lighter gauge strings than acoustics. Now this is great for beginners because of course the big challenge for beginner guitarists is simply being able to press the strings down, and it makes fretting chord shapes much easier. So 8s are really good for beginner guitarists because essentially it's easier to press those strings down. 8 gauge strings have a lighter tone than some heavier string gauges. You'll also have less volume than what a heavier string might offer, but in exchange, when you're playing with distortion, you get more clarity in the mid and low end. Things don't get as mushy. So when should you use 8s? Well, besides beginner players who are looking for a little bit of extra relief on their fingers, these strings can be a lot of fun for country style twangers, indie players who want a bit of extra brightness in their tone. Also, if you're recording with distorted tones, then 8s are a great option. Extra light guitar strings like this will most likely be too thin for guitarists with a harder or more aggressive playing style. Also, if you're playing blues, for example, or rock, it's hard to control the bends that you do with 8s because the strings are too easy to bend, so you'll often over or under bend. With this in mind, if you're an experienced player, you might find that you need to adjust your playing quite a lot to accommodate playing 8s. Okay, just a quick warning, remember switching guitar string gauges, like especially, if you were going from 8s to 12s or something extreme like that, that can take a real toll on the neck of your guitar. So if you want your guitar to play, as well as possible, be sure to get your guitar set up by a professional guitar technician. Your local music store will have a guitar tech that they use all the time. They'll set the guitar up for you to make it as playable as it can be. This makes a huge difference, especially for beginner and intermediate players. Okay, let's look at 9s. Now playing with 9s will add more body to the sound of your guitar because of course you've got a slightly thicker diameter on 9s versus 8s. These strings are usually called super lights, and super light string gauges typically start around the sort of 9 to 42 range for electric guitars and sort of 9 to 45 for acoustic guitars. As we move up in weight classes, we're paying attention to 2 factors always, and that's how the guitar sounds from one class of string gauge to the next and how it feels compared to the others. So when should you play 9s? Okay, so for electric players, while 9s are still on the thin side for some people, this string gauge is perfect for players who don't need as much resistance and fight from their instrument. You know, they don't want to feel like they're fighting the guitar, but they still want to enjoy a sort of well-rounded playing experience. For acoustic guitar players, 9s are as light as it gets, with a very bright and clear sound with very little resistance. These strings are great for beginners, but the downside is that your acoustic guitar can lack a bit of tonal range and depth. That's what you get when you play thicker strings. Okay, remember, if you're a beginner guitarist, a lot of the subtleties that we talk about in this video, they don't really matter that much. The main thing that matters for beginner guitarists is how easy it is to press down the strings, and that's kind of it. So if you're a beginner, make sure that you're using extra light gauge strings. Okay, let's talk about 10s. For electric guitar players, 10s provide you with more sort of room and space to kind of dig in and, you know, play the guitar a little bit more aggressively. I would say 10s are the most popular electric guitar string gauge of all. About half of my guitars are set up for 10s, the other half I think are mostly on 9s. For acoustic guitar strings, 10s are classed as extra lights, and a set of 10 to 47 strings will give you plenty of room, you know, to strum or fingerpick without worrying too much about the tension on your fingers. So who should use 10s? Well, for electric players, more experienced guitarists will find that they can really lean into their playing more easily on a set of 10s. It leaves room for expression and a bit more bite from the pick and the strings. I just find 10s are the sweet spot for me. For acoustic guitarists, 10s give a really sort of, you know, straightforward strumming or fingerpicking experience. These strings are thin enough to sit nicely in the hand for finger picking, but they also play wonderfully for chords with a pick, and they are my preferred string gauge for beginners. You'll find as you move up through the string gauges that the instrument begins to play very differently and feel differently. It changes a lot. You know, it's important to pay attention to what you like about the feel of your guitar with each gauge that you try. Remember that your comfort is the most important factor, and that's a very subjective, very personal, you know, sort of feeling. But you should never really feel that the guitar is hard to play or that it's kind of dominating you with its strings. And that often happens, you know, if you have unyielding, heavier gauge strings. If you have a guitar that you don't enjoy playing, it might just need a different gauge of strings and a slightly different setup by your local guitar tech. Okay, let's talk about 11s. 11s are where things start to feel significantly different on both acoustic and electric guitars. Electric guitarists will have a different experience with a set of 11s because these strings have more pressure, but they also deliver a fuller bottom end sound. You might have to work on strengthening your picking hand, but for a lot of people, you know, especially that get into, you know, drop tunings, metalheads, they find that it's worth it for what you can get from those strings. Even though it's tougher, the payoff is enough for people who are fans of that genre. Now for acoustic guitarists, they'll find that a set of 11s will play really, really comfortably and provide enough projection while still being, you know, easy enough to bend and so on. So who should use 11s? 11s work well for heavier pickers, the strings that bend less. This leaves a lot more room for digging in, down picking, articulating heavier, more rhythmic sections on electric guitar. Just one thing to bear in mind, once you start getting to this level on electric guitar, 11 gauge guitar strings, they put a lot more tension on the neck and the truss rod of your electric guitar. So you have to watch out for intonation issues, fret buzz, maybe some notes are choking out. If that's the case, then get your guitar set up by a local guitar tech to avoid any of those issues. 11s work really well for acoustic players that like to fingerpick, jazz enthusiasts, you know, on both electric and acoustic. They'll benefit more from that increased presence, I think. And because you've got those thicker strings, it leaves plenty of room for accentuating, you know, bass note movements in chord melodies, which works really nicely for jazz. If you're enjoying this video, please give it a thumbs up, click the like button. If you want to see more stuff like this, remember to subscribe to the channel. Okay, let's talk about 12s. 12s are very common on acoustic guitars, but on electric, this is where things start to get really heavy. The overall heftiness of 12s is what makes them a great choice for more specialized circumstances on the electric guitar. Acoustic guitarists will feel more at home with a set of 12s. They'll find that the sort of boom and resonance from the acoustic is really noticeable. There's a real depth to it when you use thicker strings. Okay, so when should you play with a gauge like a 12? Well, it's ideal for people that are more aggressive in their playing style. People that like drop tunings, you know, way below drop D. You know, people who are playing in drop B and drop A, that's where these heavier gauge strings really shine. Electric guitarists will find that they might have to make some adjustments to their playing in order to accommodate strings of this kind of hefty weight, but they'll also find that they develop extremely durable hands for guitar playing, which allows them to play quicker and sometimes with more accuracy and dexterity. For acoustic guitarists, 12s give a nice balance of playability and full tone that most intermediate players will enjoy, but for beginners with an acoustic guitar, I recommend lighter strings than this because they're so much easier to press down. If you're looking for an online tool to help you find the perfect guitar strings for you, check out D'Addario's online string finder tool. It's really cool. I used it for the first time today. Kind of walks you through the process with about 6 questions, and then at the end makes a recommendation for some strings of theirs that they think will be best for you. You can find a link to this string finder tool in the video description. Okay, let's talk about 13s. Electric guitarists that want to play heavier or tune lower can benefit from this massive string gauge. From blues to metal and beyond, you know, there's plenty of musical applications for electric guitarists where 13s can enhance your playing, give you extra options as a guitarist. Acoustic guitarists of kind of any genre that want more, you know, increased resonance, 13s can work well for them. They're really good for recording with acoustic guitars because they project so well. Once you get past the added string tension of playing 13s on an acoustic, you're left with something that's really kind of bold and bassy. But it also keeps its clarity. So when should you use 13s? Well, 13s are a great choice for some acoustic guitarists. They aren't necessarily the best fit for every electric guitarist because of their extreme weight. Even so, 13s can be useful for electric players in some circumstances. For example, heavier, distorted music that requires a lot of downpicking. Extreme low tunings, you know, 13s will handle them better than 12s. And also blues style music where you want more thickness from your tone. And fingerpicking tunes with lots of bass note movement. Jazz music where you've got really tight chords and emphasis on those lower string melodies. A quick warning, be especially careful with 13s because putting them on your guitar without proper assistance from a guitar tech can bow the neck of your guitar or even raise up the bridge. So we've talked a lot about the thickness of strings, but there's a few other types of strings to consider. For example, balanced tension strings. Balanced tension strings provide the same level of tension across all of the strings on the instrument, so rather than varying tensions on each string, which you get from regular guitar strings. I haven't tried balanced tension strings yet, but they're meant to provide a smoother playing experience from one string to the next, which in theory gives a more even volume and tone across all of the strings. I think they sound very cool. I'm looking forward to trying out balanced tension strings. If you've used balanced tension strings, let us know in the comments, like, how do you find them? How do they compare to normal strings? Let me know if this is something you'd like us to do a video on in the future. Okay, next up we're going to talk about hybrid sets. So this is where you have like a light top and heavy bottom strings. If you're a metalhead or, you know, a drop tuning fanatic, these strings were made with you in mind. They give you that, you know, hearty low end response, but it also allows you to keep the clarity of the higher strings. Essentially what you're doing is mixing 3 strings from one set with 3 strings of another. Ultimately that means that, you know, your chords will be brighter, you know, but your chugs will be heavier. You can also get these in other configurations such as medium top heavy bottom and also medium top extra heavy bottom. And lastly we have wound third strings. Now these are sets of strings that contain a third string, the G string, that's slightly thicker than one you would find in a regular pack because it has a smaller core wire with another wire wrapped around the outside. The wound third string is meant to intonate better than a third string would, which provides it with, you know, a better tune. It's a more flexible string, so you have better tuning stability across the board. So for guitars that have tuning issues with the third string, like my 335, which drives me crazy, I'm going to try some wound third strings on that very soon. I hope you enjoyed this overview of the world of guitar strings. Thanks once again to our friends at D'Addario for collaborating on this video, teaching us so much about this topic. You know, I knew lots of this stuff before, but I've certainly learnt more through working with them and sort of researching this and putting this video together. I can wholeheartedly recommend D'Addario's strings. I've been using them for years. You'll find links to all of the strings that we've covered here in the video description. If you enjoyed this video and it was useful to you, please click the like button. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.